All right, so here we go for Bitcoin, as always, starting it off with the shorter term timeframes for Monday, specifically on CME. And there's a couple of very interesting things going on right now. So first and foremost, Bitcoin is setting up a potential trap setup in the short term here. The problem with this is that it is one, not confirmed, but the setup is there, just as we've kind of been going over this for like the past few months here. You know, you've heard me kind of call these things out before, and then it's contingent upon a validation condition. So the validation condition for this is essentially built off of the fact that Bitcoin would be, let me just get rid of the hopium for right there for a second, would be built off of the fact that Bitcoin is building up hidden bearish divergence all the way up to, I believe, a 6-hour time frame. This is a 4-hour right here. We have 1, 2, 3 drives already. 6-hour is also going to be printing 1 drive and potentially 2 if we do confirm a local high. So as always with divergences, the big thing is that it needs to be local high versus local high. How do we confirm a local high right here? Because as of right now, it's just a gap fill and technically still okay. So this condition would be fully confirmed with any sort of a closure below the 382, which is also essentially that last high or low in this case at 29,500 or so. Any sort of a 4-hour closure below there, or an hourly closure below the 13th of May low, which was 29,340. And yes, I would be looking for Bitcoin at minimum to come back down over the next, 24 to 48 hours, whatever it ends up being, somewhere around here to 618, which is just around 28,000 bucks. Technically speaking, just below it. Also, do be aware that if Bitcoin were to come back down below about 29 to 29,500, for example, we will naturally see 6-hour stochastic momentum turn down as well. Again, this actually would be a bit of a corrective signal. So while it would imply, another $1,500 to $2,000 move to the downside, it would just be, technically speaking, a corrective signal. So where do things really get nasty for Bitcoin? Where do I essentially look at this as a failed bounce attempt and targets down to, basically our current lows and probably a little bit lower than that over time as well, somewhere around about 20 to 23,000 bucks would be initiated with any sort of a medium-term time frame closure below the 618 here, which is about just under 28,000 bucks. Until that happens, though, I do think that we could get multiple things. Something like this, would be kind of nasty, putting a bit of a higher low right there, and then trade back up to 32.5 or 32.6 essentially. Or Bitcoin, perhaps puts in a low right here and just goes up. I think that's a little bit less likely for right now. And then obviously, while I would be looking for a bounce off this region, at least in the interim, if Bitcoin were to, put in a lower high, especially below about 30,000 bucks right there, that's at the point where I'd say, hey, this is very likely going to come down hard and be very, very nasty. I'd probably be looking for that if it is going to happen sometime around Tuesday, if you will. So in this case right here, I'm going to get rid of this. The old LARP lines need to go. But ultimately, as long as Bitcoin's above the 618, I stick with what I've been saying here, and the conditions for bounce continuation are still very much valid. The main condition for bounce continuation to the upside over time on the daily is the daily stochastic momentum oscillator over here. The condition for remaining with upside momentum is as long as Bitcoin is closing dailies above 26,350, and then also for spot price action, which probably not going to matter as much as CME here, but pretty much in the same area anyways, 26,900 or so. So those are rather close to each other. Until then, I would express caution. Again, if Bitcoin does take out essentially last Friday's low, I think it was. Let me just double check that this was actually the Friday low. Oh no, it actually wasn't the Friday low, but basically 29,500 or 29 even, depending upon your time frame there. As that will start to confirm a lot of hidden divergences and have targets a little bit lower. Until then, though, I do want to reiterate my stance that on the higher term timeframes, I do think Bitcoin's a little bit more likely to bounce out of this region to the upside first before having another rollover, which I do think probably does happen, maybe later this month, if that. Although timing is never something that I am, very good with. In fact, there's like good memes about me, saying probably happens in the next 2 weeks, and then it happens in the next 2 fucking hours, So that's why I go off of levels and sort of validation conditions and invalidation conditions. So until then, the reason why I do believe that Bitcoin is more likely to bounce to the upside before, creating new lows here is this condition based off of the 5-day time frame, the 5-day BBWP versus momentum chart. 5-day BBWP getting into these teen-digit percentiles and expanding from those levels has led to an average move of about 45% over 40 days. We played that out from the high of about 48,000 bucks right here to our low of about 25,000 bucks right here. And guess what? It was literally right on the dot with 40 days, actually. We just closed it last night, in fact. So after that move has typically happened, we do see a bit of a mean reversion play, both to the upside and the downside. So we can go back and back test this with each other. What I'm talking about is after this move plays out over here, for example, like last May, the bounce after that, about 30% to the upside, for example. Now, for example, on this next one over here, after the move plays out to the upside, the next pullback to the downside, about 25%, right? So I did that for all of these. I added them up, took the average, and the average sort of mean reversion play after that was about 31.1% move from the low of the prior, the low of the end of that move. And in this case, what would 31% look like? Not too much higher than where Bitcoin already is, about just over 33,000 bucks, which would which would essentially fulfill this test over here, which yes, I do think that Bitcoin very likely does test around this region. Sorry, more like 32.5 to 33 even or so. Over time, and then it's just a game of range resolution. So any sort of a closure, even on like a 4-hour time frame above, especially 33, if you're on a higher term time frame, any sort of a closure above 32.5, and I would be looking for Bitcoin to mount an assault all the way up to about 35 to maybe even 36,000 bucks. That would also be in alignment with one of our major fibs here. That's gonna be the 0.5 actually. So you got gap fill, 0.5, even the daily 21's kind of coming around that region as well. And by the way, guess what's in the way of the 32.5 region? Well, that's a 382 right there. So if we are going to have a trending move to the downside continue from here, we do expect a rejection there, like a harsh rejection, and then keel back on over. Obviously going below that $28,000 level or so is where I start to really look at Bitcoin as likely to retest officially our current low and probably make a new low actually. I do think that Bitcoin, I don't think that Bitcoin has necessarily put in a low just yet. I think that we might be a little bit close, but I'm not seeing what I want to see on the macro, for example, which by the way will happen after the fact. So at earliest it'll say at the beginning of June. I think that's rather unlikely, but that's what I'd be looking for in order to call like, hey, macro low is in, and then you probably got another like half year to a year of sideways accumulation, and then maybe we get a nice bull market again around the time that the next halving starts, perhaps, something like that. Anyways, in this case right here, I think I've mentioned most of the things that I wanted to mention. The other thing that I wanted to get onto, of course, is the funding rates right now, of which funding on the daily is actually still negative. It's been consistently negative, as you would expect, in a pretty strong downtrend movement since the last week or so. If we go to the hourly, let me just update this. I want to make sure that it literally is still negative 0%. Let's just double check here. And where is it? I just want to make sure that that's actually updated. Come on. It's still 0% actually. So not really getting any sort of an insight from this just yet. If we start to see this tick up to positive funding rates, I'd feel a lot more confident with calling a move down first. So short-term bull trap first, not really much of a bull trap, but short-term downside move first, very likely bounce somewhere around about 28 or so. Maybe just under it. If this starts to turn negative again, I would say that it's more likely that Bitcoin does push through and do some busting action first, somewhere around about 32.5 to maybe even 33,000 bucks, and then very likely down after that. So with that in mind, I know that a lot of people are gonna be calling this out right now. You're probably gonna see this all throughout the fucking crypto sphere, and it's this. People are gonna be, we got an inverted cock and balls over here, and you know what? We can make a measure move on that. Insane. Oh man, we're going back to $39,000. Incredible. If there's one thing that I feel very confident will not be happening, that would be it. I think at best, in like a Bula hopium situation here, Bitcoin goes to like 35 or so before like a nice stop. You also see that I very, very rarely call out formations. Triangles, good, at least in my experience. Channels can also be good as well. Head and shoulders can also be somewhat good as well, but this one I would not say is such. The reason why is the volume signature is actually not proper here, or at least not as it currently is. So yeah. Anyways, and that would just have fucking trap written all over it, somewhere either 35, very, very likely 35, maybe if things are like a lot more bearish than what I'm considering right now, then probably around like 32.5 to 33. But anyways, let me just make sure that I hit all my notes over here. I think I did. So yes, the main points, big trouble below about 27.8 to basically 28,000 bucks. As long as Bitcoin on the daily is closing above 26.5 or so, I am generally looking for this move to carry upwards and onwards, whether we get a short-term downside move or not. Hopefully that was in some way helpful, and I think I'll leave the video off right there.